Hello everybody, welcome back to the Rugby Bunker. I'm delighted to be joined for a Champions Cup preview for this episode by Illtud Dafydd from AFP. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Despite the winter, there's a bit of nice December sun coming through the window, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I wondered who actually was going to be experiencing worse conditions out of the two of us, because it's pretty fresh here in London. Tell us, anybody who's not familiar with your work, whereabouts you're based.
Yeah, so I work for Agence France Presse, which is France's international news agency covering all sorts of sports, but specialising a little bit in rugby, Le Bleu, Top 14 and the Champions Cup, based in Paris. So I was at the snowy Stade de France 2 weeks ago to see Fabien Galtier's side finish their autumn campaign against Australia. And then, now it's straight back into stuff with the Champions Cup this weekend.
Listen, before we dive into the Champions Cup, I feel like as we've got you here, it would be very useful for me to get a bit of your expertise on the top 14 and just to get a kind of summary of how the season's going so far. I feel like the story of probably Section Paroisse or Po, right? I mean, near the top of the table. What's been the secret, Illtud, behind their success so far?
Yeah, it's big time. I've got a soft spot for La Section as well, because I spent 3 months volunteering in a alternative community when I was in between my student days in the suburbs of Po. So the town means something to me. And what's been cool to see is that over the past 4 years since Sébastien Piquet has come in, who was the former head coach of the France under-20s and under-18s team, as he came in as head coach, they've changed their focus from getting some big-name foreigners like Colin Slade or Conrad Smith into really focusing on getting good French talent, and even good French talent from near Po as well, and giving them the chance to play top 14 rugby. And some of them have already gone on to play for France, like Emilien Gaiton and Théo Sadis-Ogbre, and some of them will very soon play for France, like Fabien Berboy and even Grégoire Arfay. So it's quite cool to see those youngsters come through, and the fruit of that labour, of that work. Also the club's patience with Piquet, because it's not easy in the top 14 when you're finishing 10th, 11th, 12th every season to be like, yeah, fine, we'll trust you, we'll wait. And then last season they finished 8th, sneaking just about into the Champions Cup pool stages, and they're back with the big boys for the first time in 25 years. And also this season's been decent as well, because they're second in the table, and they put 50 points on La Rochelle on Sunday, so things are still going quite well.
Yeah, I think that's a remarkable result, as in one that really sticks out for me, mainly because we're so used to the way La Rochelle have gone in years gone by as one of the dominant kind of forces of French rugby, of European rugby, right? But then if you look at the side that Po have assembled, I know people speak so highly about Julian Montoya's influence on Leicester when he was there, how much of a key contributor he was there. And if you scroll through their side, they've got some familiar names to English supporters, I guess, as well, with the likes of Joe Simmons there. Tell me about him.
Yeah, Joe's quite cool how he's gone on and actually fair play. He's injured right now, got a little bit a niggle, and probably out for another few weeks, so he won't be playing against Southampton on Sunday. But his goal kicking has really been key to what they've been doing and getting results over the line. Especially they do have some quite exciting backs, but without him slotting over those penalties to get the 3, 6, 9 points that you need in the top 14 really to build up momentum in games, especially away from home, it's been really key. And what's the big problem with Po is they don't have much depth behind him, but when he is available, he just kicks over. And until his injury, he was the leading scorer in the top 14 this season. So he's really been impressive, and I think he's enjoying life down there. He's even won a few man of the match awards at Po, where what you get with that is a nice green beret given to you by one of the local wine sellers who make the Jurançon sweet wine. So it's all gravy down there, I think, for Joe Simmons.
That's a bit better than your average player of the match medal. I feel like they are onto a bit of a winner there. Got a lot of teams tilted down the bottom of the table who we're not used to seeing: Racing, La Rochelle, Lyon. What's going wrong for them, those three sides at the start of this season?
Difficult to say. You can't really bracket them all together, really. At the moment, we've seen in the top 14, it's becoming almost a top 12 with Montauban, Perpignan so far below. And then Jan Roubert, the Ligue Nationale de Rugby's president, said this week that he sees it as like any one of those top 12 teams can potentially win it because of the way the league's formatted. And if you get into the playoffs, you never know what can happen. Racing are a club I see almost every week. I go up to their press conferences, and they are still in the rebuild under Patrick Cosalo. Their focus has moved away from big name stars like Owen Farrell, Circulisi, into youngsters, replaced Owen Farrell with Hugo Sens, who's a 24-year-old playing the first time in the top 14. 3 years ago, he was playing the third tier. that just highlights how their focus has changed. Weird, because they've got Kang Ghazal, who's quite a hot-headed character as head coach. He's quite marmitey with the players. He seems to have got along with them quite well now. The big miss for them is someone like Baptiste Couillou, who's their captain. If he's not playing, and if he's not playing well, things aren't going well at all at Lyon. And then at La Rochelle, I'm trying to figure out what's going on there, and I don't really know, which is frustrating because O'Gara over the summer, he seemed to have made the best recruitment of anyone by bringing David Niniashvili in, Non Legarec, and Hugo Pacom to bring a bit of youth and a bit of more pace to the backline. But it doesn't seem to have worked just yet, maybe because their pack is still a bit aging, a bit old. Will Skelton needs Antonio, Ivani Bottia. Maybe for next season, once again, they need some more fresh faces into that forward pack as well. O'Gara's got red carded after kicking up a fuss on the weekend against Pau at Stade Rennais, so that he won't be available or to be pitch side for the coming few weeks. So yeah, there's a few problems, but the top 14 is an interesting one because if you go on a little run, 3 or 4 wins on the road, and you're on the bounce, and you're back into the top 3-4 places, yeah, they might be close to the relegation playoffs or relegation places now, but by mid-January they could be up to the top with Pau and Toulouse.
Yeah, we were so distracted by Eben Etzebeth's red card on Saturday that kind of took the attention away from 2 pretty spectacular red cards. The O'Gara one, which you mentioned, he's how many weeks is he missing for?
They've not come out yet, but he's suspended while they wait for the outcome to come, and he's facing a disciplinary meeting on the 10th, I think it is, if I remember. Feel free for listeners to correct me on that, but it'll be next week. So he'll be in the stands for at least this weekend for La Rochelle. And the second red card was Antoine Hostoy after 34 seconds, I think it was, for a high boot on Aaron Candidier Hong Kong, who's also English qualified, who's probably got the best English accent out of any French rugby player ever. And yeah, that was just a loose foot that reckless players need to be more careful, and if you're not careful, then you get red carded.
Talk to me about Yannick Tarit's red card for Racing against Toulouse. We don't often see the old flying headbutt to the chest red card. It's a rarity. I'm not saying I want to see more of it because we want to see players stay on the field, but I mean, listen, for unique red cards, I'll happily take it.
Yeah, French sports fans had like flashbacks of Zinedine Zidane at the 2006 World Cup, and some people have been joking, saying it was quite not funny, but I've been seeing the light side of it, which is understandable because it's so ridiculous that can you really be serious? Can you really be intentionally doing that? But sometimes when the red mist falls and you've got a 6'4" second row in front of you, and you just move your head forward, that's what you're going to hit, isn't it? And Efrain Elias, who's the Argentine second row who was headbutted, who was really under the radar by Bristol at one time before he joined Toulouse. He looked like he was in a lot of pain on the ground for a while. He kept on playing afterwards, but getting hit like that hurts a lot. And I think Tarit will get a few weeks ban. I don't think we'll see him back until February, March.
Illtud, just to wrap up this section, this very helpful kind of recap of all things French rugby. What's the mood about the national side coming out of the autumn? Obviously, huge disappointment that they couldn't get one on South Africa and get that revenge for 2023, but then pretty tense game against Fiji, and then that wild high-scoring finish against the Wallabies. What's the vibe at the moment about Les Bleus?
I've been trying to put my finger on it because a lot of people asked me this question, and losing to South Africa was a massive blow. Huge blow, because from a morale point of view, that 2023 quarterfinal loss still lingers in memory for fans and players and coaches. It's still there, and that was their one shot at revenge properly 2 years on, and they failed. What that showed was tactically, Galtier is not quite there compared to someone like Rassie Erasmus. Even with 14 men playing a centre who's covering flanker and midfield, they still didn't manage to beat them. And in the last 20 minutes, they didn't even manage to get close, really. Springboks steamrolled them. And then the 2 games that came after that against Fiji and Australia, they were almost pointless because the big one, they got left by the wayside. France was really disjointed, I think. The attack looked really weird, as in after 4 or 5 phases, they didn't seem to know what they were doing. Defense, they were rusty, but then at the same time, generally across world rugby now, attacks are getting on top. They still look really poor under the high ball, despite having trained just that pretty much for the first 2 weeks of the November campaign. The daggers are definitely not out for Galtier because he's got so much credit in the bank after what he's done, and especially off the field, how he's brought club rugby and international rugby together over the past 4 or 5 years. But there are some questions about his communication skills, how he likes to be so philosophical in press conferences when Some people just want some concrete answers of what's actually gone wrong here. He was pointing the finger at a lack of prep time, but everyone has a lack of prep time, don't they, really? This seems like, the Irish have been together X amount of time, South Africa have been amount of time, X time. Well, they have, but then at the same time, France cannot become South Africa overnight. They cannot become South Africa over 5 years. To really change that, you have to change for almost the economy of the whole country. So you're not doing that. So you have to adapt to what you have now. And that's quite a bigger question about the structure of French rugby and player availability, et cetera, et cetera. But the big problem, I think, was just the lack of the players out there. They didn't seem to know, after four or five phases, especially with the ball in hand, they seemed bereft of ideas. And that's the problem. If you don't know what you're doing, phase 1, phase 2 on the 22-meter line with half an hour to go, that's not elite test rugby, is it?
Who sort of oversees that area? Is that Gautier's remit? Who's the kind of assistant who's in charge of that role?
Patrick Arletas was the former Perpignan head coach, as the attack coach. He came in after the World Cup. And he's a really nice guy, really chatty, really sociable, smokes a few cigarettes, speaks really well in press conferences, and the players really like him. And when you go and watch their opening training sessions, they listen to him. And what he does actually makes sense, but I don't know what's gone wrong, why they aren't able to transfer what he's doing in Marcoussis every day to the weekend games. So maybe it's something that they need to work on before the Six Nations, because that's going to come around in 2 months, and there'll be a lot of pressure on that as well.
It feels like they're still blooding a lot of young players. I know in the last Six Nations we saw Oridu and Diego getting more time. But tell me more about Calvin Gorges, the young centre from Toulouse, who had that outstanding kind of debut against Australia. I mean, the talent certainly doesn't seem to be lacking.
No, definitely. France will always produce high quality players because they have the academy system in place, because they have 30 plus the national professional clubs producing players at an extremely high level. And they have the Southwest, which is mad for rugby. And Calvin Gorges is the next one along the line. He's 21, I think. He's a bit of a Rolls Royce of a midfield, isn't he? He can break the line. He looks good. He's got lovely hair, and he reads really well. He's got that enough pace to get through that first line defence. And then his pass to Bielbiaré showed that he's also got cool-headedness and the technical ability to fling a pass 2-on-1 simple and put Bielbiaré away. The challenge for him now is to keep that consistency, because someone like Paul Coste, who is 2 years older, he broke through a bit similarly with Toulouse 2 years ago, but didn't make it to the French starting lineup or get a cap. But he tailed off because of injury, because of making that step up from playing Espoirs under 23s rugby every week to training and playing senior rugby is difficult, because physically, sometimes your body's not ready. Mentally, it's tiring. The big challenge for Gorges now is that he can stay on a long time. What will help him is Peter Aki has just left Toulouse to go back to the Auckland Blues, giving Gorges a chance of really making that number 12 jersey his own, and then hopefully he can, because he's got talent and he seems quite a calm-headed, relaxed kind of guy, and anyone who's got a moustache like that deserves to have a go, I think.
Just don't hear nice hair used enough to describe a player's attributes. I'm glad that got in there. Also knew that I was going to butcher the pronunciation of his surname, so apologies to Calvin and his family. Listen, France really interest us, I think, going into the Six Nations. Obviously, there's that good mood around England, but you've got England going to Paris potentially for that final day of the Six Nations. I mean, that's going to be a blinder. You mentioned Peter Aki going. I loved the kind of send-off that he got on Saturday with the hacker and everything. That looked awesome. He's been such a great player for Toulouse.
Yeah, superb. Like la force tranquille, almost, like just playing that 12 position where he doesn't get the glory, but does all the hard work, all the work in the shadows. That's on the field. And off the field, his wife Kayla McAllister, who's the sister of Luke McAllister, the former All Black who played for Toulouse, they really were the nucleus of the big Pacific Islanders group in Toulouse, bringing all players and wives and families together for barbecues or dinners, and really making that transition from moving over from New Zealand or wherever to Toulouse, making it easy. And they'll be missed for that as well, I'm sure. And Aki was a superb player, won 4 Champions Cups and 2 top 14s, or maybe the other way around. Either way, incredible performances and return for him trophy wise, and just he deserved everything he got last weekend, like the applaudissements, the cheer, the 25-minute documentary video on the Toulouse website, YouTube page. That's kind of what you want from a foreign player, coming in, learning the language, making the effort, playing well, doing the hard work, and then leaving as an absolute hero. So there's not much more we can say about Peter Aki, but a superb player, and by all things I've heard from players, a really great guy off it as well.
Yeah, it was lovely kind of send off for him. And a hell of a pickup for the Blues as well. I think that's a great bit of business for them. That's a very useful top 14 France roundup, mate. Let's take a quick pause and then dive into a bit of a preview of the Champions Cup, which kicks off as we record on Friday today. Right, Illtud, let's go through some of the favourites to win this year's Champions Cup. So you've got, in order, because I often like to pick out the favourites in my head, but then I like to just check with the bookmakers to see if I've missed anybody as well. So you have joint favourites, Toulouse and Leinster, which is fair, I think. Narrowly behind them, Bordeaux-Bègles, and then Bath narrowly behind the defending champions, Bordeaux-Bègles, as well. I wonder if we could just maybe talk about those four teams, because it does feel like it's that quartet and then maybe a little bit of a gap to some darker horses in this race. So let's start with Toulouse. They've got some guy called Antoine Dupont back and available, who's apparently quite handy, so that's nice. But what else have you seen this season from the top 14 leaders that suggests they'll be strong contenders in Europe?
We mentioned him earlier, but Calvin Gorge is someone who is his first proper season at senior rugby, and you got the impression, especially before the Autumn Nationals, every time he touched the ball for Toulouse, something happened, which is in itself amazing, because if you have that sort of player who can do something out of nothing, like an Antoine Dupont, it's really handy. Then their pack is also just solid. There's no much weakness. The only problem maybe is at tight head with Dorian Aldeguerri, who just gets penalised like he did for France in November in the top 14, and maybe having different refs will be even more difficult for him in the Champions Cup. Across the board, they've just got depth. They've got 2 or 3 players in all positions who can step up and do a job. They all know what they're doing. They've got Thomas Ramos as a kicker who just kicks everything. And if he fails, then give it to Romain Tamac to have a go as well. And if you're really having problems, there's that guy at number 9 who can do something as well. So it's quite handy. They look quite solid. The top of the table, the top team, but they did lose to Po a few weeks ago, and they highlighted a few weaknesses they might have in the way they play. But no, I agree. Toulouse and Leinster would be favourites for the Champions Cup, like they've been for the past 4 or 5 seasons.
I think with Leinster, it's more this mental question, isn't it? As in, have they 3 final defeats in a row to La Rochelle and then Toulouse, and then the semi-final stunner against Northampton Saints last season, when I think everybody thought that this was their time to kind of make amends for those near misses. There is, despite winning the URC last season, it does feel as though there is a tiny bit of pressure on them just to kind of get over the hump in Europe. It's not a bad way to go about your business if you can bring in someone like Rico Ioane, is it, to, shore up your backline. I think it worked really well with Geordie Barrett last season and his sabbatical. Now you get Rico doing the same, even though Rico wasn't involved as heavily for New Zealand in the autumn as in years past. He basically only got a run out against Wales from memory and otherwise was kept out the side. He still adds really nice depth to their backline. I wonder, even with that URC win, it just feels like there's a lot of pressure on Leo Cullen to get over the hump here.
Yeah, big time. Because I felt that with the whole Jack Nienaber Super Sport interview and the backlash that's come from that. Maybe it was a bit of from my perspective, I think it was a bit of overreaction, because his contract is going to be up anyway. So and also in any other business, when you know your contract's up, you're allowed to speak to people. He hasn't signed anything as far as we know. So he's allowed to keep his options open. And also how integral Leinster are to the whole ecosystem of Irish rugby. That what if a Leinster team isn't going well, then does that mean Irish rugby as a whole and the Ireland national team isn't going well either? And maybe that underlines a weakness within the Irish system, where there's been over-dependence on Dublin and D4 over the past decade almost, and not enough on Connacht, Leinster, Connacht, Ulster, Munster. And maybe if Cullen fails to get the Champions Cup title over line this year, you might have a rethink and go elsewhere, and people higher up at the RDS will also have a think.
And also, it's an obvious point, but Leinster's fortunes are going to run through Sam Prendergast and how he develops this season. He had spectacular highs and lows last season. We went into the autumn with Ireland wondering whether Jack Crowley actually was going to kind of take back that number 10 shirt and make it his own. And actually, Prendergast kind of came out of the autumn with some real credit in the bank. So now you've got the question of, can this young, talented fly half take Leinster to the next level in Europe? I think I find that debate fascinating. All the pieces are in place, around him. I mean, just looking at the second row partnership this weekend of RG Snyman and Joe McCarthy, I mean, this is a squad with so much depth when everybody's fully available. You can see why they have that billing of favourites. It's just the mental element of can they put the heartbreak of previous years behind. And the problem is we can say that about Leinster, and they're more than talented enough to do that. But those scars like linger, and those scars have an impact, especially when we get to the final.
Big time. And like knockout mentality is a big thing, isn't it, really? Like you can do what you want in the pool phases, but at the same time, in Champions Cup, you can't really do what you want because you really want to be the top 2 seeds to be able to guarantee home all the way through, don't you? But then last season, that showed that Leinster, even at home, you can still lose a knockout game. And yeah, those that knockout mentality is a big thing in any sport, really. And you need to have those, as a Welsh thing, the top 2 inches or the last 1% to really have that in you, which Welsh clubs haven't had and don't have, I don't think. And not many people have it, but South Africans definitely do. Maybe that's Archie Snyman's handy in there, but what I think would help having Prendergast would be having a 9 or another 10 with him with a bit more experience and maybe a bit more experience of proper knockout rugby. James Gibbs Park, superb 9, probably after Dupont is the best 9 in the world. But does he need like someone like a Felipe Contepomi back in his day when he came into Leinster just to be able to calm him down, like give him that arm over the shoulder? When things aren't going right, he can just step in, settle the ship, get the game over the line. I don't know. I don't work for Leinster Rugby, but I get the impression that maybe you need someone. Jody Barrett and Rick Owane have been really good signings, especially as like poster boys of, wow, they're coming into Leinster, great. People buy shirts, people buy tickets. But then what would you prefer? Just having people coming to the Viva just to watch one person, or having a player signed for 2-3 years to help bring through 3 or 4 or 5 other players who then can last for 10, 15 years, you know? And I can't think of a player off the top of my head that would be helped, but the first person which came to my head was a Felipe Contepomi sort of thing, who can play 12, who can play 10, who's been around the block a few times, who can like offer that advice to that 10, who every 10 in the world needs advice, whatever age group, whatever level. And I think Prendergast might need that as well.
Get Jimmy Gopperth out of retirement. No one's buying it, and send him into Dublin. This is more of an Irish point than a Leinster point. Well, I guess it applies to both, but it's a huge period, I think, in the World Cup cycle, but also for Leinster to kind of develop Paddy McCarthy and Thomas Clarkson. They're 2 young props, and they're both starting this weekend. I would imagine that it's probably a priority for Leinster, but also Ireland to keep their kind of development going, keep their education going in that front row, keep giving them minutes and match exposure, because I think Ireland need to build up that depth behind Andrew Porter and Ty Furlong, and they clearly look like 2 talented young props, but this is the competition where you can really test players and stress test them and see how they come out the other side.
The Champions Cup is almost a safe place to test them to a certain extent, because it's not that as big of a goldfish bowl as a test match, especially at what's going to come now with the Nation Championship, where you probably have to put your first choice team out every week to be able to do something. So then you may as well the bench a full half, starting them in the Champions Cup is a perfect way to do it. And then I hope they go well, because the age profile in the Ireland squad is quite worrying. It's definitely more similar to South Africa than anyone else, and they don't have as much depth in those positions as South Africa either. And no scrum, no win, as the saying goes.
No scrum, no win. That's what they always say. So Leinster and Toulouse deserve John favourites, I think. If we look at Bordeaux, it's hard to back up in the Champions Cup, but it's not impossible. Teams have done it. I mean, Toulon and Saracens back in the day, and La Rochelle more recently with those back-to-back final wins over Toulouse and Leinster. I'd wonder, do you think Bordeaux are in a place to go again? They certainly recruited well. I love the moves to bring in Jean-Luc Deprier and Cam Walkie and Celestia Rayassi as well.
Yeah, Bordeaux Bègles are interesting because they suffered a big hangover at the start of the season, calmed things down, and now they've lost 2 in the bounce again. Maybe that's because they had so many players out during the November series, or with France and with other test countries like Rayassi at Fiji or Big Ben Tameifuna with Tonga, which has made this whole transition from being into the new season a bit difficult. But they look okay, they look decent, and going back to back is always difficult. What makes it even difficult is they have to go to the Bulls first step, and I think from checking this morning, a side has never won the Champions Cup having gone to South Africa during the pool stages. Okay, it's only been 3 years.
What is that?
But it highlights how difficult it is. The game itself, the 80 minutes, is hard because it's in South Africa. But everything that comes around that, which is having to travel the week before, changing hemispheres, changing the weather. In Pretoria, playing 1,300 meters, and then also coming back home, reacclimatizing to Bordeaux, which will be maybe 8 degrees Celsius next week. They've got quite a nice pool after that as well. But if you don't finish top of your pool, if you don't get 90 to 20 points in your pool stages, things are even more difficult as well. So yeah, they're going to have to go against history to be able to get a nicer draw. But what would be cool is a Bordeaux or Toulouse in a final in Bilbao. The amount of French fans that can get to that would be insane. Like Bordeaux is, I don't even know, maybe a 6-hour drive to Bilbao. Toulouse is like 4. It would be insane. So hopefully one of those two get there just because of geographical reasons. Rugby-wise, it'll be difficult. Bordeaux. Jean-Luc Dupree's still injured. Kamiwaki's come home to Bordeaux and settled in, and Moriassi looks quite cool, especially as a backup option to Pierre Barret and Damien Penoso. And yeah, hopefully they can get through it, but like this weekend going to Pretoria won't be easy.
I mean, what a position to be in to have Bielbiari and Damien Penaud as your wingers, and Deporter at centre as well, who looks a player. The quality marshalled by Maxime Lucu and Mathieu Jalibert is obviously there. You mentioning Bilbao has just made me think, like, no offence to Spurs or to, I mean, I love Cardiff and the Principality, don't get me wrong, but Bilbao as a destination for this final is very, very, very appealing.
Before the Cardiff final, the PCR held a press conference and they said they had around 30 or so interested host cities into hosting the Champions Cup final in Bilbao, and then 2027 for finally when it'll be in Lyon. And what I found is a shame is those two cities have held the final weekend already in the past 10 years. And who are the other 28 cities who surely there's like a Champions Cup, Challenge Cup final weekend in Brussels, Amsterdam, Milan, Rome, Turin, like, would be insane. San Sebastian, Barcelona, for example, would be incredible. And I just think EPSL, I'd like to see more cities in other countries getting a chance to host that sort of weekend, because it just cheesy, it's corny, but it grows the game, doesn't it? And there's going to be kids, which is quite cool about Bilbao, there's going to be kids who might get cheap tickets to go to the Challenge Cup final in Bilbao, who 10 years' time could be playing for Spain in the World Cup, which would be pretty insane.
Yeah, this comes up regularly. We're waiting patiently for the first Champions Cup final in Italy. It feels a bit mad that we've had one in Spain before we've had one in Italy, given that Italian sides have been participating in top tier European competition now for decades. So no, I fully agree with you. The last of the favourites I wanted to talk about are Bath, who maybe we should be talking them up a bit more to win this. I think what counts against Bath in the Champions Cup is their record. Obviously, they don't have much of a record in Europe to speak of. They went out in the pool stages last year. I had to revisit this because they had such a great season last season, Bath. I was like, how did they go out in the pool stages? And it was losing to La Rochelle at home in that first week, and then losing at Benetton away by a point, which essentially killed them. But then they did go into the Challenge Cup. They did win that. They won this treble. They have phenomenal depth, Bath. They have comfortably the best pack in England, and if you compare their pack to Leinster or Toulouse or Bordeaux-Bègles, they're the one team in England who you think might be able to kind of compete in that area. So they have that on their side. I wonder if it is more, given we've just spoken about Leinster's kind of lack of getting over the line and the mentality factor, I just wonder whether, while they have a very talented squad full of excellent international players like Finn Russell and Thomas du Toit, and the list goes on, they're just too light on Champions Cup competition experience, maybe, when it gets to those crunch games. What do you think?
Potentially. What I like about them is that they've got a gnarly pack, and I think in Europe, in the Champions Cup, you need that. They've got a half-back pairing who are settled, who know each other well. They've got players who can turn a game on a moment. Oi Lawrence, Finn Russell. Those are quite key ingredients to getting far into this competition. But I think like you said, another key ingredient is experience in the competition. The Challenge Cup is nice. It's great, fantastic. But this is a different level. Up until 3-4 years ago, a team had never won the Champions Cup final without having been in as a runner-up before. I can't remember. I think it was this maybe 10 years ago now. I was in university and I was quite bored and I looked into it, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So it shows that you do need that experience of finals footy, as the Southern Hemisphere say it, to be able to use and go ahead with it. Bath have got almost everything they need. They're 2 seasons away from getting that Champions Cup final trophy, where this season they'll get to a semi or a final, lose narrowly, bounce the ball, whatever. So then to learn off that and to go again for 26, 27, I don't know. But I agree. I like the look of Bath.
I think what they will be hoping is that they'll be able to take the big match mentality that they had from those finals last season, and that will just translate to the Champions Cup. And maybe it does. I mean, they're coming off a comeback win at Saracens on Sunday, which sort of confirmed that in the past maybe they might have gone behind at Saracens and just not pulled off that comeback, but they have the talent and the mentality to win those games. Maybe that is enough, even though they don't have a lot of Champions Cup pedigree in recent years to speak of. I think their last semi-final appearance is like 2006. They still have a lot of the pieces in place now to make a run. I'm like you. I just don't know I wonder if they need a season of getting to the Final Four or getting to the final, testing themselves there, learning from that, and then going again. But they're certainly, listen, they're right in the mix, and I'm glad to see that they are listed so high by the bookmakers as potential favourites. Can I ask you what the mood is about the Champions Cup in France? I'm going to guess pretty good, given that French teams have won the last 5 years. I mean, it's utter French dominance of the tournament, and I don't know if that has led to a bit of indifference over here in England about the Champions Cup, but it just feels like interest in this grand old competition is waning massively. What's the mood about the Champions Cup over there?
Yeah, success breeds success, and French clubs have been very successful. And it's not even winning it; they've also had a lot of clubs going to the quarters and the semis, which has bred interest and grown interest. And the big thing in France is that the game is on. All the games are on beIN Sports, which is a paid TV channel, which they don't hold the top 14 rights, but they've held the Champions Cup rights for almost a decade now. But then there's 2 games every weekend on terrestrial TV and on France 2, who also have the Six Nations rights and who are the traditional home of rugby in France. So even if you don't fork out 15 euros a month to go to have your beIN Sports, on a Saturday and Sunday when the Champions Cup is on, you can watch, normally it's Toulouse and or Bordeaux-Bègles La Rochelle. Which, even if you have a passing interest in rugby, you put the TV on, or you've got on your phone to watch it while you're getting on with your weekend, you can watch it quite easily for free, which makes things much easier. You've also got good coverage in the press, written press, especially like Midi Olympique, all over it. L'Equipe will be all over it this weekend as well. So yeah, it's definitely in a healthier place than it is in the UK, and I think that is mainly down to TV deal. Because Premier Sports, sadly, is behind a paywall, and also it's not that well-known of a channel, realistically. If it was on TNT Sports, which is, I think, what's been rumoured for the next deal, I think that would help quite a lot, because they already have a bit of history regarding TV rights. They already have the Gallagher Premiership, and, well, until probably next year, some test matches as well. I think that's what kills them. What's great in Wales, for example, is at least there's one game on terrestrial channel TV each weekend, but maybe that's not enough. And with only 3 million people in Wales, it's not the same thing as having potentially 50 million people watching it as you would in England, or 60 as you do in France. Yeah,
I was just checking. I know that ITV have an agreement to show some Champions Cup games, but I can't remember exactly how many it is. But you're right, in terms of, not to turn this into the TV rights podcast, but the news this week that the Nations Championship might be going to ITV and not to TNT sort of frees up TNT's budget, and it would make a lot of sense to bring the Champions Cup back into the TNT fold, potentially moving forward, which is a good point. French clubs might not want to tinker with the format too much of the tournament, given their recent success, but the fact that there's 8 teams from the Prem involved, I think that is part of the lack of appeal over here, because it's effectively so easy to get into the Champions Cup. I mean, you only have to beat so many teams in the Premiership and get so many wins, and you can almost, with the utmost respect, you can almost kind of rule out Newcastle. So you essentially need to be in the top 8 of 9 to get into what is meant to be the premier competition in Europe. I wonder if moving forward, whether you share this opinion, that if there's a way to cut it down to 20 teams or 18 or 16, whether that is a better competition. I appreciate you're trying to filter a lot of teams from a lot of countries in, but right now it just doesn't, for me, have that best of the best appeal, which it should do.
No, I think I agree with you. And there's talk in Midi Olympique this week about changing the format, but not much, only moving bizarrely the first round of fixtures to October, having another round of fixtures in December, and keeping the 2 in January, which then would free up and make things easier for Test rugby to happen later on in November, which does make sense, but I think it would be weird to have a group of games, a gap of 6 weeks, and then another group of games, and then 2 in January. So there's no talk here for now about dropping the number of clubs. I find it also weird there's 8 clubs from France because, okay, it's a bigger league, but then someone like Castres, they do care about it because they got to the quarters-finals last season, but they don't have the depth to go even further. It's great to see Po, who did finish 8th last year in the tournament for the first time since 2001, but they don't have the depth to do much. The amount of injuries they've got as well, that doesn't help either. So I would like to see maybe 6 from the top 14, 6 from the Gallagher Prem, that gives you 12, and then 6 from the URC, that's another 18. 18 is a weird number though, isn't it? Sad. Maybe you get up to 20 by having I used to enjoy when there used to be a playoff between some of the clubs between the different leagues. It added a bit of spice in the season. It added especially in that weird, if you're finishing mid-table in your own league, there's not much to play for. But if you say, actually, well, potentially you've got a playoff to get into the Champions Cup, I could add something. I don't work for EPCR like I don't work for Leinster Rugby, but it's something that potentially could be explored. I don't know.
It's currently the top 8 teams from the URC, but then you are juggling a lot more kind of interest from various countries in the URC, so that's a bit trickier. But yeah, I just wonder if there was a way to get it down to maybe 20 is the way forward, and then you can. That feels like it makes a lot of sense. You keep the 8 from the URC, and you do 6 from the Prem, 6 from the top 14, and you just find a way to make it a bit more cutthroat. I feel like the format has changed so much over the years, and losing those home and away fixtures against the same opponent, which people really enjoyed, has just taken the shine off it, really, and taken a bit of the edge off the competition. Yeah, something needs tweaking because it's not quite firing. Listen, before I let you go, 2 questions to finish off. First, are there any kind of dark horses who, we spoke about the favourites, but any dark horses who kind of stick out to you? I know you've spoken about Po's depth being an issue, but any of the other French teams that stick out as well?
I finished off my Substack this week. It's called Jouer, the French Rugby Dispatch, if anyone wants to go and have a look at it, by including Toulon as contenders alongside Bordeaux-Bègles and Toulouse, just because if it wasn't for Thomas Ramos in the quarterfinals last year, Toulon were going to the semis against Bordeaux, and potentially they could upset Bordeaux-Bègles there. Toulon have got what they need as well, a bit like Bath to a certain extent. They've got a gnarly pack. They've got Baptiste, who plays 9 but also covers 10 because of how it controls the game. They've got Paulo Garbisi as a left-footed kicker who is a lovely playmaker. They've added Juan Ignacio Brex to that back line, who has been like a duck to water in the French rugby, and the top 14 since arriving from Treviso, and they've got enough backs to finish stuff off as well. So I'd like to give Toulon a chance, especially with they've bought out like a cool little black kit with a bit of touches about the Provençal red and yellow touches to it as well. So yeah, from France perspective, I put Toulon in there. Maybe the Stormers as well, just because they've got a really nice team going on. The Stormers feel like they've got something brewing, and also a bit like Kit Geek, and they're back with Adidas now, as they should always be. So I hope they go as well. Wow.
Coming out with the kit chat, you're a man after my own heart. That's my kind of language. No, I agree on the Stormers. They were on my list, especially with the way Sacha Feinberg and Gomazulu has gone for the box this year, but also the signing of Kobus Reinach. I think the fact that you're going to get those two paired together at club level is really, really exciting. And you've got Damien Willemser as well, so you can keep that Springbok spine while developing around them. Stormers coming off a really impressive win at Munster on the weekend, where it was another kind of dominant South African scrummaging performance over an Irish opponent, which is probably not what Irish supporters need to see after the way events panned out in Dublin. But no, I think the Stormers, with the way they've kicked off the URC season, the kind of rugby they're playing under John Dobson, they're top of the table now with 6 wins, unbeaten, and a whopping points difference. Yeah, I think they have to be contenders for Europe, and they kick off this weekend against Benetton as well. So, against Bayonne, sorry. So if they can get a win there in France, keep that momentum going, that would set them up really well. The other dark horses who I listed down would include, you've mentioned Toulon and Pau. I guess Bristol would be in the mix just because they are pure chaos a lot of the time to watch, and I think teams can get caught out by that defensively and suddenly find themselves chasing a game. It's kind of a miracle that Bristol are as competitive as they are, given the injuries they've had to Harry Randall and AJ McGinty and just big figures ruled out for long periods of time. But actually, they still look like a team who could blow sides apart. And you probably can't rule out Northampton. I know Northampton have had a decent start to the season. They're getting their test stars back. Would have taken a lot from last season's route to the final. They were so good in that semi-final in Dublin with that Tommy Freeman hat-trick and Henry Pollock kind of tearing up and showing that he could do it on the big stage. The loss to Bordeaux will have been invaluable in Cardiff. And yeah, I wouldn't rule Northampton out either.
Yeah, I agree. Northampton, they would have learned a lot, definitely. Any team that can turn over Leinster in a semi-final in Dublin are definitely worth being worried about. And yeah, they're impressive. And Finn Smith knows what he's doing. And Henry Pollock, despite someone in the French press saying he's got a face like everyone wants to hate. And as a Welshman living in France, it's difficult to say something nice about English rugby players. He does bring something different on the field, and then off the field, he's a really good character, and he's a breath of fresh air. So yeah. And from spending a bit of time around Northampton last year, Champions Cup, they're a really great club, nice people working there. All the youngsters seem to have their heads in the right places and be calm, despite the fact they've already got to Champions Cup final. They do seem to be quite modest as well. So yeah, I put Northampton in that bracket of the contenders as well.
Right then, mate, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to pick a winner. Who are you going with? Who's winning this season's Champions Cup and following on from Bordeaux last season? Is it going to be 6 French winners in a row?
I think it might just be, but I think it'll be Toulouse, just because Bordeaux's trip to Pretoria this weekend might just take that little bit out of them. And then Toulouse's group stage draw seems okay. They've got both Sharks teams at home, which is quite nice. And then, yeah, they should be okay. And if Dupont stays fit, which he should do, they'll be even better. And even the big blow for them is not having Juan Cruz Malia around who can cover from 10 to 15 and kick at goal. But yeah, I'm going to go for Toulouse.
Yeah, they feel like the obvious one. For variety, I'll say that Leinster get over the hump. I feel like I need to see it with my eyes. I think they will. I mean, I worry slightly for Harlequins going over to Dublin this weekend, especially with the side that Leinster have got out. But you can see Leinster getting over to a good start against Quins this week. They go to Leicester next week, who are building nicely, but under Jeff Parling, but it's his first season, and I think they still have a few things to figure out. And then, yeah, Leinster with that doubleheader. La Rochelle currently not quite figuring things out. And while Bayonne have gone pretty well in the top 14, I can see Leinster picking up that win over in France. So yeah, you're looking at them. The pool stages, as we've said, they'll be fine. It's when it gets down to the crunch games and the knockouts, can they put the ghosts away from previous years? And for some reason, I just wonder if this might be their time. So yeah, Illtud, what a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for this kind of bumper preview that you've done with me about the Champions Cup and the recap of life in France, mate. It's been lovely to hear from you again.
A pleasure anytime.
Cheers, mate. See you soon.